Very good. So another formal welcome to our webinar today, May 26, 2021. And hopefully you can read the slides if you're just following along with the voice. This webinar and our talk today, I kind of think about it as more of a conversation and less of a lecture, obviously. But it's about building back your team and doing so in a thoughtful way. Because we're all going to face sort of hybrid challenges for building back not only our workforces, but how we work together, how we collaborate, how we share information. And so with that, Ennio, if you could go to the next slide. Ennio is behind the scenes and very important, one of our research directors at OnFrontier. I want to talk a little bit about OnFrontiers, our host, just really quickly, without giving you sort of the infomercial. And explain our roles, Darren and Anil and I, and do a formal introduction. But before we do that, for those of you that are not as familiar with OnFrontiers, OnFrontiers is an enterprise knowledge network platform. So it is the technology platform. Most of us, Darren and Anil and myself, Ennio, who's helping out with the slides, and Sherry, who's helping with the chat today, thank you. Also technologists with the OnFrontiers program and our team here. What we do at OnFrontiers when we talk about enterprise knowledge networks is we collectively organize your employees and their knowledge and their expertise, and collectively make profiles that we can share not only with individual teams but across the enterprise. And there's all kinds of sort of extensible applications of this, from business development to research to new product development. And for that reason, our mission is to really help experts play a more meaningful role within your organizations. And so that is really kind of a nutshell or if you will, just sort of an overview of what we do here. We believe that addressing the knowledge and expertise management challenges will help companies adapt faster to this rebuilding. And as we come back around from these times, I won't say the U word, but as we sort of rebuild our teams and come back these days, and what we would like to do is return to not just a normal, but to an optimized normal. Sharing information and knowledge is going to play an incredibly critical role, as will collaboration. And we'll talk about that today as well. So again, thank you for joining. And I think just real quick, I'd like to introduce myself. So, I'll be your panel moderator today. I'm a technology executive. I've started 3 companies now. I'm on my 3rd company. Sold the first 2 companies. Most of my experience is in the intersection of talent and technology. And I've been mostly a customer operations and go-to-market person in these companies, so playing the role of chief operating officer, chief revenue officer, and those types of roles. Also been a part of a larger publicly traded company in terms of business strategy. And that's about me. So I'll be more asking the questions and listening to the real experts, Anil and Darren and Ennio, if you go to the next slide. This is what we'll be covering today. So we'll get through our introductions. We'll talk a little bit about Anil and Darren's backgrounds. I don't think we'll need 15 minutes for that. And then we'll get into our, unless Anil, you're smiling, you want to talk you have 7.5 minutes. We want to get into our questions, and also we encourage you folks to jot down notes as we go, because you have panelists. And one of the really kind of cool parts of being at OnFrontiers is we're all experts on the platform. So if you have questions about anything that you've heard today, or anything about Anil's experience or Darren's experience, or certainly my experience, this would be a live forum where you could ask us without going through any other means. So with that, Ennio, if you go to the next slide, let's start in alphabetical order. Darren, sorry, usually you're probably at the top of the alphabet almost, but Anil trumps you today. So Anil, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, Joel. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for spending a little bit of time with us. I'm super excited to be here and speaking with you, and hopefully learning some things from you guys as well. So like Joel said, my name's Anil Saxena, and my current role, I'm a partner enablement strategist for a SaaS company called ServiceNow. And essentially what I do is I help our partner organizations like Accenture and EY and Deloitte and those big consulting organizations. I help them make sure that they have the right people in the right place with the right skills at the right time over the long haul, right? As we're building and growing to a $10 billion organization. Prior to coming to ServiceNow, I played a number of different roles, but mostly in the sphere of employee experience and organizational change. I was a senior leader at the Gallup organization. I ran the North American consulting arm of the Great Place to Work Institute. And so I've been working remotely now for the past decade, and my whole company right now is working remotely. And so I think this conversation about how do we really enable and optimize the world of work as it stands right now is a powerful one, and one that is very, very timely as we're slowly but surely trying to reopen the world and go back to some semblance of normal. And I use air quotes because I'm not sure what normal is going to be anymore. But that's a little bit about me. Thanks a lot for participating. And Joel, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Neil. And Darren, could you tell us a bit about yourself?
Right. Sure, that one's a hard act to follow. Thanks, Neil. I'll just ditto what you say. So I am Darren Padilla. I'm really the managing consultant at Odyssey Consulting Group. And the focus there is really helping organizations improve performance through people-focused strategies. So realize people are the ones that actually get work done. So leaders sometimes feel, if you use them like numbers and they don't understand why they're not getting performance, is because you have to realize people are human. And so understanding human behaviors within organizations is really what we try to do to help leaders gain insights, right? Sometimes they have to understand how do they connect to people in such a way where they can improve their performance through any sort of processes, procedures, or really the culture within the organization. So it's what really the past kind of 18 months has done is really changed a lot of management culture and experience around people working from home, right? So thinking, if they're working from home, production's going to drop. I can't physically see them into the office. So I have to spend all of my time concerned on every minute and every moment that they're working on. But the interesting thing is latest studies have shown that the reverse has happened. Productivity has actually increased because now people actually are sitting in front of their computer most of the day. And so they're actually producing more work than before. So it's really now changing how we look at what's this new hybrid model into the future. Again, understanding some people really work well being at home. Others actually miss the social interactions within organizations. And there are some pluses and minuses for both when it comes to actually productivity within the organization. So I'm super excited to kind of have this discussion to talk about, what are the next steps in this new way of working in a hybrid model. Back to you, Joel.
Thank you, sir. So we've set the stage here. I think with Anil kind of coming to this, that's okay, Anil, you can go forward. But with Anil approaching this from a lens of coming from a technology company, also has firsthand experience about ServiceNow, publicly traded company, high-flying company with a high-flying CEO. You obviously have workmates and folks that you work with that are impacted by this at scale. And Darren coming at this from sort of the consulting angle and helping companies think through these challenges. I do want to point out there's a member of our audience, real quick, Daniel Watcher, that he's lended some expertise to the discussion, and I use the term optimized normal. He actually one-upped me, and I love his new description. It's the new better, simple and elegant, the new better. So Daniel, thank you for that, and thanks for participating today. To kind of get into the questions, and not to kind of, but to get into our questions today. This is a broad one, so I think Anil and Darren will have different, very, very much sort of different focus points on this. But how's collaboration optimized in these hybrid workplaces? And maybe, guys, one of the things, I know this is a little bit ad lib, but what does hybrid workplaces really mean to you too? If you could weave that into your answer, and again, we'll go in alphabetical order. Darren, you'll go next on the next question, so everybody's prepared. But Anil, could you weigh in on this?
Sure. So I think hybrid workplace is an interesting term, right? Because it could mean a number of different things. I think in the current state of work, it means that people are working in a number of different places, in a number of different spaces all at the same time. Some of them could be in an office, some of them could be at their homes, some of them could be at a co-located location, like a WeWork kind of place, if those places are still open. So I think it means that work gets done wherever people are working, and hybrid means they're working together in many different ways at many different times. And I think that what's interesting about the time that we live in, and how we really optimize how we're getting work done, is really kind of two big things. So, and maybe more, but two for right now, right? I think one is that you have to create a safe space for people to work, both in the office when people get back to the office, and at home. And safe isn't necessarily just safe from falls or interruption or things like that. It's really being safe in how you get work done, and being able to share ideas, and being able to question and to push back on solutions that are given. So I think that's one big thing. And you see in statistics now, Gallup had a recent poll that showed that a safe workplace is something that people are really, really interested in by leaps and bounds, especially over the course of the past 18 to 24 months. And then I think the other thing, the other nuance here, is that it really requires that we address this sort of digital and analog challenges in collaboration. And so when I say analog challenges, what I'm thinking about is that we want to make sure that employees have the time to focus on the work that they need to get done. So although, right, I love Slack, I love WhatsApp and all those messaging tools, but they can be distracting. And so how do we help people build that focus, right, and enable that focus? And the other one is to be able to learn, right? So we're moving so fast, we have to be able to learn. So we want to be able to address that sort of analog thing, right? And then the other part of it is the digital challenge, right? So we want to make sure that people have access to the tools that they need to get their job done, and they have really powerful collaboration tools like Microsoft Teams and other tools like that, and they know how to use them, right? I think it's important that those two things really are kind of collaborate together, being able to create that safe workspace and being able to make sure that you're addressing the analog challenges that we have in this new world of work, and the digital challenges that we have in the new world of work. So I think that's probably where I'd start, Joel.
That's really helpful. I have a question for you. Just a follow-up question. You know, I hear the word safe, and you're right. You know, the first thing that comes to mind is tripping and falling over my desk, and sort of the physical well-being of safe. That word. I think what I'm hearing from you also is sort of our mental health, and I too have seen some studies, and you guys are nodding to this, but people, and Darren alluded to this at the top of the meeting, that productivity has gone up. What that also means is that we're sitting at our computers longer, we're working all hours of the day. And so one of the things that I've been reading a lot about is, what does a normal workday look like? Or maybe what Daniel would call the new better workday look like? Could we make that healthier? And maybe that's something we can explore. If folks have questions about how you two are thinking through that. That might be an interesting topic to pick up towards the end of our session today. And I appreciate your answers. That's a thoughtful, and I like the analog and digital piece as well. Something to think through, because I know that most of us are probably challenged with that. Darren, when you think about not only the sort of the hybrid workplaces that Anil refers to, love to hear your bend on that, maybe even to start with, but how do we optimize, this collaboration now? Like, what are we facing here?
Absolutely. I think when we talk about safety, it's really psychological safety. Really, how do people feel safe in the new way and the behaviors, right? And it's interesting, Neil, I totally agree with everything you stated. What it made me think of is actually the question, how is hybrid collaboration optimizing workplaces? So a little twist kind of on the original question there, because yeah, we're now talking about how many digital tools do we have to collaborate with during kind of the new working environment, because now it's not necessarily, an 8 to 5 being inside the office where you just have the analog types of communications. You got texting, you have chat, you have a lot of different collaboration tools kind of that we use to communicate, and it seems to go a little faster kind of than before. And then the new workplace, or new kind of hybrid workplace, we also have to give each other grace, because now you're inviting people into your own environment, whatever remote location you're in. So that's another place where psychological safety comes into play, right? Giving people grace when, UPS knocks on your door, right? Or the plumber's there to fix something that just happened in the middle of a meeting, and how to allow that to take place. So that's another change in behaviors. We can talk a little bit later how that impacts culture. But really, the use of collaboration tools like MS Teams, Slack, SharePoint, those kinds of things are really changing the way that we now communicate, right? So instead of what we normally would walk to somebody's desk, you can now pop up a chat to have those kind of conversations. And so now you're having faster collaboration there. With Teams, that one really is now allowing you to post information out there to share. Hey, does anybody know about, or hey, where can I find? So now you're able to kind of quickly blast a request of information across an entire team that in the office you wouldn't necessarily have the ability to walk around everybody's desk to gather that information. So with these collaboration tools, you're able to really gather experience and knowledge from a much wider net than you did before. The challenge is really understanding the governance around the use of collaboration to optimize kind of how you work together. Yammer is one. I'm not a big Yammer tool person, except for its use in communicating more enterprise-wide communications. I don't find it very useful as a collaboration tool for sharing knowledge and information. So that's where governance needs to come in, and when and how do you use email versus chat versus postings versus when I use Yammer. So that is the other challenge too you're going to have in these hybrid environments is, what's the governance and the culture you want to do with how and what tool you're supposed to be using kind of to share that information.
Darren, I want to ask a follow-on question.
Sure.
Have you thought about, or have you seen, and Neil, feel free to chime in when Darren's done, are there policies? So are companies making policies about how to communicate and use these rapid collaboration tools? Have you seen that at all?
Yes. And some of my clients, they'll make policy specific client with Yammer, or they'll tend to close it off, where enterprise or corporate communications really will own that. And that's where they're going to drive more of corporate communications that way. I see when it comes to rollout of MS Teams becoming much more common, very similar to Slack. The challenge there is more guidelines and principles of when and how to use it. So for example, one client, what they actually did is to change behavior to really move majority of your communication and collaboration into MS Teams. They actually restricted email, internal email, So that way you could really send email internally for a week, such that it forced everybody to go into MS Teams and start to post. And what was interesting is after that, 95% of communication happened in MS Teams versus 5% in Outlook. So that drastically changed, getting hundreds of emails a day to maybe, less than 20, because of maybe you're including an external person. So maybe that's when you're going to need Outlook. So those would be some of the, I would say, the guiding guidelines and standards that they would roll out within a department or an organization.
Yeah. Neil, anything to add there?
Yeah. So I would say, I would echo most of what Darren was sharing. I think two things. One, Darren brought up this terminology of psychological safety, and I think it's such an important thing, right? I mean, Google, which was on the top 100 places to work list for years, they did a really deep study in this realm of psychological safety and how that was one of the most important parts of really driving success in their organization. And I think it lends to this idea of guidelines and defining sort of the rules of the road or the rules of engagement. And I'm not sure policy, and I know, right, it's kind of nomenclature, but I'm not sure it's about policy, like the regulations of how we're going to communicate. I think it is, to what Darren was saying, this idea of what's the culture that you want to develop in the environment that you want to foster. So when you're thinking about, do you want people to be able to communicate real time and to share ideas? And so you want to kind of shift the way that people are having conversation. That's probably a much more powerful thing to do. And then the other thing is, this is all part of leadership development, right? And I've seen a couple of questions about the kind of focus around leadership, but it's really important that we think about, in this sort of new, better way of working, that we focus on this idea that leaders really need to set the tone. And so we have to help them understand what's the culture that they want to create. How do they want to drive communication? How do they want to foster collaboration? And all of those things are exceptionally doable now with all of this great technology. We just have to help them shape that a little bit. So yeah, I think that's my 2 cents.
Yep. And Neil, just a little bit to add on to that, I totally agree. You do not want to stifle norms that create on how humans communicate with an organization. So give guidance, allow the leaders to demonstrate the behaviors you're trying to do, but also you want to allow some space for it to naturally evolve. Because people now using technologies may communicate a little differently than they would in an analog kind of format being in the office. So give a little bit of guidance, but also allow the culture to naturally formulate the norms and how people want to communicate with each other. So the more that you involve people creating their own culture on communications, then the better the adoption is going to be in the future as well.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. I've seen personally some of the leaders that I've worked with and work with, if you're like me, well, if you have small children, which a lot of us do, at home, Neil's laughing, our rhythm has changed. We don't have as much childcare, and I think this particularly impacts women, and that's been, I think, well documented and well deserved in the documentation. And I think there can be a louder voice for it personally, and that's an opinion of mine. But what I'm driving at is that I've seen leaders sort of, and I echo this in my own motions. I don't send Slack messages to my teammates at 11:30 at night, expecting them to get back to me right away. I suppress and time my messages to team requesting help or assistance or collaboration in some way, so people aren't getting Slack messages with my crazy schedule. whether it's 5:30 in the morning when I wake up or 11 o'clock when I'm just, finishing up my to-do list. And so I think you both of you mentioned policy is a little harsh, but leaders need to lead by example, which I think is a strong attribute. The other thing I wanted to touch on real quick before we move to the next topic, what I'm hearing about the new better is that we have faster ways to communicate, more efficient ways perhaps to communicate than we ever have. You don't have to go to somebody's cube or see if they're around. I don't even know what that looks like anymore. But this also creates this new vulnerability. And I think that new vulnerability manifests itself in a lot of different ways. One of the benefits, by the way, that I think that it's not all bad, but the new vulnerability is I've gotten to know people outside of my organization in a real world environment and understand their challenges a little bit better and have a different perspective on who they are, because their 4-year-old comes in and needs their shoes tied in the middle of a Zoom call, which we're all, the ubiquitous Zoom call. And that I feel like there's almost a connection there that and sort of this new relationship building where you realize the person that you're dealing with, and perhaps outside of your org or within your org, is a human. And so while it may be more like counterintuitive to think that this new hybrid workplace is inhuman and, just very prescribed, I actually think it's personally, my opinion is it's actually exposed more humanity to me than in some ways I care to share about myself, but that I've seen from others. So you guys comfortable moving to the next one? Ennio, do you want to move to the next slide here? We may have, there we go. So we get into this a little bit, and I think contextually I wanted to say that at OnFrontiers, and this is not an infomercial, but just to give people a bit more context on why we're asking this question. We develop an enterprise solution, and essentially it's an enterprise knowledge network, and it's a comprehensive database, and it has essentially includes not only our internal employees, but it also intermixes or puts into the mix external consultants like myself, like Anil, like Darren. We're all experts on the platform, subject matter experts and advisors, specifically designed around identifying expertise that you can pull from outside. So I think this is a relevant question in the vein of who we are at OnFrontiers and building these knowledge networks and these expertise networks. But how do we foster a culture of exchanging this knowledge between our hybrid teams? So how do you build the foundational, how do you put the cornerstones down to make this a lasting new better, if we will? Again, I love this, Daniel. I'm going to use it. We're going to beat this home. But how do we do that? And Darren, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. And we already kind of touched on it. Really, leaders sponsor the kind of behaviors you want to demonstrate, right? So it always comes from leadership, really setting clear expectations kind of with the team. Again, it is a cultural shift, because prior to the knowledge worker, right, you were praised for being an expert, and you don't want to share your information because then that helps keep your job, because then nobody else knows how to do it, right? In the new knowledge world we're dealing with, the reverse is happening, meaning the more that you share about your knowledge, the more you are considered now a subject matter expert and are sought after within the organization. So it's a really interesting shift. And usually those who share a lot more knowledge are the ones that are identified as high performers, in somebody that they may consider even for the leadership track as well. So it's an important leadership behavior, because that's how organizations are able to change and adapt and adjust. So one of the things that I've seen before leading a knowledge management organization is really working through that sponsorship in the leaders is number one. Number two is we included this into their employee performance management. So what that means, it set expectations on, hey, you need to minimum answer 10 questions, from anybody who submits it. You need to contribute at least 20 documents into the knowledge library and kind of appropriately tag it. We've also included it in new hire orientation as well. So we had a whole section on knowledge management. What does it mean to share knowledge? How do you share it? What are ways that you can review information and then add on your expertise and experience? So that's kind of how we've integrated into really the culture, the performance, But again, having leaders be the ones that would really demonstrate those behaviors, but more importantly, as they see their team start to mimic those behaviors that they want, this is where you can now recommend or commend them in front of the team. Hey, that's great that you were able to share this. Also think about sharing success stories is another one. You know, hey, Joel, thank you so much for answering my question yesterday. You saved me 3 weeks worth of work, because now I was able to go to the right person at the right time, and I was able to download, you know, some templates I didn't even know existed. So sharing those kind of success stories is now going to let everybody know, like, wow, I didn't realize I can be faster if I can just reach out and find out, hey, does this information exist somewhere? So those are some of the things that I've experienced with some of my clients of how we've really began to create this culture of exchanging knowledge and information.
I love that. Multiple touch points, Anil.
Yeah. So I think what I'd add to what Darren shared is really 3 big things. So one, I think it requires us to do some intentional connecting of people. So I think oftentimes in a hybrid work environment like this, we really have to make sure that we're forcing is the wrong word, but we're strongly encouraging people to work together to get projects done, so that they're really spending time actively collaborating on completing an initiative, because first of all, it fosters a good work environment, and secondly, as we're sort of all staring into the abyss that is the Zoom screen, it actually helps us connect a little bit more as human beings. And Joel brought up this idea of intimacy, and I think that's a really good tactic to help. The second one I'd share is to try to shift your initiatives and projects to being done in a more agile fashion. So, right, I know we throw that term around a ton, but this idea that we're sort of working on this most, the minimum viable product all the time, right? And we're completing a little bit and sharing it and getting feedback and doing a little bit more, and really accelerating the way things get completed. And then the third thing that I would say is that we want to also give time to have like free form exchange of knowledge. So what I've seen a lot in some organizations is they have productivity Tuesdays, right? So they share, and doesn't have to be Tuesday, right? Could be any day of the week. But they share ideas on how to use Excel better, or how to take notes more effectively, or whatever that thing is, those little tips and techniques. And or they utilize time together to solve a particularly sticky issue. And they have someone documenting the solution. And so you're sort of real time creating those solutions and modifying them over time. So I think, the net here is that we want to make sure that we're enabling people to connect, and that we're leveraging this hybrid environment to accelerate the development of solutions and codifying those solutions real time, so that that knowledge is being kept for the next time that we have an issue that we need to address like that.
Yeah, I love, Anil, I've been writing down this terminology. So in the new better, I've been writing kind of pros and cons. Like I have new better on this piece of paper that I have in front of me where I'm scratching some notes. But intentional connections is I think a simple phrase, but really, really powerful if you think about it. Bringing a colleague, I was in a meeting the other day. It was a technical review, or an IT security technical review, where usually, a CTO, myself, and someone else would be in the call, but we brought one of the engineers that's on the DevOps side. And I think this person added a lot to the call, and it's that intentionally inviting people in and bringing them. And I think the hybrid environment, I think it fosters that. I think it encourages that. It's easy for people, to make things seamless. It's grease the skid, so to speak, to get other people involved in the organization and a chance to, whether it be a fly on the wall or just join a meeting and listen or take notes or what have you. I think this intentional connections concept has legs, and it's wider than just the simple phrase. So thank you for that. We're going to go to the next slide. So this is, this hits home for us at OnFrontiers. We talk about collecting expertise into a database. We talk about taking our internal employees into this database so we can easily find people. If somebody's work done, and I've seen some examples at OnFrontiers as an advisor, and there's some really interesting ones. How do we foster cultures in the sub-Saharan African desert for yogurt production? I mean, strange, crazy things that to some of us, like I'm a technologist, so that to me is just amazing. That we look for experts to do this. So maybe there's somebody in your organization that has done that, and if you're into that sort of thing, if that's your business, and finding that expertise is really, really valuable. And if you don't have it and you need to do it for a project, OnFrontiers gives you the ability to go outside and bring that expertise in. So what I want to talk about for a couple of minutes here is, in your experience, and Neil, I'd like to start with you. How have you seen, this collective expertise leveraged, and specifically to an outcome that has moved the needle?
It's a great question, and I think that this is something that historically has been a challenge for organizations, so that they hire people as experts, right? They bring them in based on their knowledge and skills and experience, and then somehow they start down a path doing a particular role, and they're never tapped again for that piece of knowledge that they brought into the organization, or they're not tapped as often as they could be. And so I think one of the things that I've seen, and OnFrontiers is an awesome tool to be able to do this, is organizations have kind of created an internal database of skills to be able to pull from. And one particular example that I remember pretty recently is creating a matrix for new organizations, right, to be kind of onboarded, and being able to bring expertise about how to create talent and bench, how to create governance, how to create sales and marketing, all of those kinds of things. And they brought different people from all over the organization, from different departments, and really connected them so they could create this matrix and accelerate the onboarding of these new companies, and actually shut down or dramatically decrease the amount of time that it took to get a company onboarded and productive quickly, shifting that from I think it was 8 weeks in the beginning to a little bit over a week and a half once this process was put in place. And so, right, that saved time and money and effort, and actually increased the number of new partner organizations that were able to participate. And so I think that's one example, but this is more and more important as organizations mature, and as we need to get more and more nimble, and be able to provide more value to our clients and customers over time. We have to be able to leverage the people that we work with in new and interesting ways, and really draw on all of their areas of expertise in ways that we might not have thought about before.
I love that answer. Thank you for that, Darren.
Yeah, in this, so kind of in the world of knowledge management, there's actually a whole process capture, repackage, disseminate, and then improve the knowledge. So that's really kind of the knowledge management process. We spend all this time on capturing. Where we don't spend time is actually reviewing knowledge, information, expertise, experience to kind of dwindle it down into what are the new learnings that then we can now integrate into improving business process, improving our culture, improving, how we manage clients, et cetera. And then having that feedback loop to see how did we do in implementing those. So that's one of those things is we need to spend a little more time in actually kind of reviewing this knowledge experience. Hit on it really kind of, data mining or data analytics now is, the new focus now we're seeing in the future because of the capabilities we have with, AI and machine learning, things of that nature. But some of the other things we want to look at is including root cause analysis or lessons learned as part of your normal process whenever you're finishing really big deliverables or initiatives or projects. Close the loop, right? By spending some time with everybody who is involved to download lessons learned, their experience, how did it go? If they were to do it differently, what would they do differently? And also think about the reverse. Share or do root cause on your successes. Like, wow, this came out really well. How do we identify what really made it that way and what can we learn from it to repeat it? So those is kind of the next level of, we have all these wonderful tools that collect this information. What's missing is who's going back and then filtering through to see what nuggets they can take back and then really kind of implement the business bottom line.
I appreciate that. And I think that rings true. The thing that comes to me, the big picture thing that I kind of come back to, and when I looked at this question, obviously we knew the questions ahead of time so we could have a conversation here. Like that, I'm going to demystify how we may sound like we know what we're talking about. Well, certainly Neil and Darren do. But the thing that struck me is that there are two super important things to organizations. And one of them is just fiscal, our operating capital, right? And I know that's wonky. And I think equally, if not more important, is the intellectual property of our teammates, our workmates. And if we're not leveraging that second asset in a way, then we're limiting ourselves. And so I think, Darren, with your examples of the sort of the full journey, just like a customer lifecycle journey, and sort of it's not cliche, it's very important, but there's a knowledge journey, and harnessing things and retroactively looking, the look backs and the closing the loop. And I think, as you're alluding to with your circle you're drawing, and I think you and I probably share the desire to get on a grease board here, but I think that's eminently, it's incredibly important to leverage the expertise that you have within organization. It is a competitive advantage to do. And I think that's fairly undeniable. Anyhow, let's move to the next one. We're going to I love this because it's like, where are we falling down and what can you avoid, really? What are the mistakes that you're seeing? Well, let's spend a cycle on this, and then we'll take we'll sit back, let our hair down a little bit here, and take some questions from our audience. I know we've seen some good stuff come across. Anil, I think it's your turn. Companies making the base. Where are we falling down? What have you seen? What have you heard?
Yeah. So I think, right, the easy answer is they don't do any of the things Darren and I have talked about up until this point. So, right. But I think, the three big areas that I've seen organizations that make mistakes in this environment is one, they are still trying to manage work, right? And I use air quotes because I'm not sure that was ever really possible anyway. And now when, as a leader, I can't walk down the row of cubicles and make sure that everybody is in their chairs, that makes that even harder. And so that's the first thing is, I think they're making mistakes by trying to somehow control or monitor the work that's getting done, when it's getting done, that kind of thing. I think the second big mistake is that they are equating the way that work got done pre-pandemic or even a few years ago to the way work gets done now. It's entirely different. And the idea that we're going to be producing things in the same way at the same rate is really quite ridiculous. And so I think we need to reevaluate that idea of how work gets done. And that's the kind of second big mistake. And then I think the third big mistake is that they're not communicating enough or not communicating at the right level. So Joel, you mentioned a little while ago this idea of really getting to know people and this level of intimacy. And there's an issue when we don't allow that to happen. And so I think those are the big three that I see. There's many, many others. But that notion of really making sure that we're communicating in a way that's human and that's often enough with enough granularity that really people can take action on. I think that that's a missing.
Yep. To add on, I really agree. This is kind of where we talk about psychological safety and with leaders demonstrating. I like intimacy. I also like the word vulnerability because you are, right? You're inviting people into wherever your remote location is. It puts you in a vulnerable spot. You don't have control all the time of your environment, but seeing leaders really allowing you to be human and seeing them to be human really opens up the ability to actually better collaborate and build trust, right? Intimacy, vulnerability, those are the foundations for building trust in high performing teams. So that's one. The other is I also more on the technology. I think organizations rely too much on technology to really manage human behaviors and letting, instead of humans be humans and let technology augment, right, the ability for people to collaborate. So you always hear about AI and machine learning and things of that nature. You still need people to take and apply context to your experience, your knowledge and information, right? As you know, our vernacular changes every year. If you have kids, you know that there's new words you got to learn because what you used to say is like 2020 and now we're in 2021. So computer machine learning, they can't keep up with the way humans are interacting. So that's the other thing is they're not realizing you still need humans to develop your taxonomies, your language, your communication styles within organizations. So a lot of time they want computers to do that and you still need people to do that. So they'll underfund areas where you'd actually have people who manage that. And then not getting the sponsorship again at the leadership level. And then the other thing is, include this knowledge sharing collaboration into your new hire programs. That would automatically set the culture from the very beginning. So that's why I say, if you want to change cultures and organizations, start with the new hires because they have not learned the bad behaviors. You're training them to learn the new way that you want the organizational culture to be, and then work on everybody else to kind of get up to speed at the same level of kind of where the new hires. So those are things that I would recommend.
Building education in those systems where people share ideas and learn, go figure, it impacts the bottom line. Novel concept. Maybe transcend this into our workspace, maybe for good now. I want to move. Thank you, gentlemen. By the way, this has been it's been fun for me, frankly, and I hope for our audience as well. But what I'd like to do now is just move to a couple minutes of questions. There's been some really good stuff, and I know the three of us are nodding because we get to see the questions come over, and Ennio and Becky and Sherry, some of the folks here at OnFrontiers who've just done a good job of putting this all together. They can recommend them, but I'm going to pick a few out. And there's one from Lewis and a combination, kind of a flurry that I want to address from a gentleman named Lewis and a gentleman named Andrew. and I've heard this, this return to work. In fact, I walked past a store. I live in Portland, Oregon. I walked past a retail store. They're like, welcome back. And I'm like, to what? I mean, I guess. But even more pointed, this return to work. And I think Anil and Darren, you've touched on this. We're already here, and we've been probably working more effectively, perhaps, in some organizations than we ever have before. Can you talk to me about how leaders can address this in a different way that's not this sort of like trite, I'm not going to get into it, but you know what I'm saying. I'm not communicating this well, but maybe Anil, start with you. Like, how do return to work? How do we get leaders to realize that we've already been doing this and this is the new better?
Yeah. So the questions have been excellent, and so I think there's kind of two sides to this, right? So one side is, as a senior leader, you have a obligation to communicate these kinds of things in a way that that resonates with people. And so the idea of, we're going to return to work, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, quite honestly. And so I think that's one thing, that if I was going to consult or coach a senior leader, I would probably have them be very careful about how they talk about this kind of getting back to the office, if you will, right? That's sort of this return to work. That's sort of the nature of things. Like, let's get back to the office, and I don't know, do whatever we did at the office. I think the other side of this, though, is that there's some obligation on us as experts in this space, and all of you that are attending, to help that leader see the causal connection on revenue, on an increase in customer satisfaction, on driving new growth in particular markets, and really make it easy for them to see those connections, and for leaders to therefore support this hybrid work, right? So it would be nearly impossible for a CEO to talk about, return to normal, or whatever the terminology was, if they could see that, well, in 2019, at this time when everybody was at work, our sales were here, and now they're here, right? There's no dispute about what happened there. So I think that's probably how I would position this, is that on one hand, right, got to coach that leader on how to communicate this, and to know that the pandemic's not over, right, in many parts of the world. And on the other side, that we as experts need to help pave the way for leaders and help have them see the connection to the increase in those key KPIs for the organization.
Appreciate that. Darren, I want you to weigh in on this quickly, and I've got another one for you to follow on. So sure, if you could add to this, and then I've got one I think specifically for you.
Yeah, just really quickly, is the working norms has shifted. So for leaders to think that we just took a pause and to come back, it's not logical. That's not common sense. But this is now actually where you need to include then those within the organization to understand where are they at. Because some people, again, this is the way of work, it really has improved kind of their lifestyle. Others, it's been challenging, and some of them are looking forward to kind of being back in to an office environment. So really, it's really more of, hey, let's coach them to really talk about really a new way of doing work, right? But it's really understanding some of the data. That's what I would actually go out, is kind of where is everybody at here, and then making those adjustments internally.
I think this is a critical decision. I mean, this is kind of a tipping point for a lot of companies and organizations and teams. I mean, how do you, everybody's got a voice and everybody's got a different comfort level. And I know our teams, I work on teams that are in different parts of the world, and like, it's not, different parts of the world have always worked differently anyway. And now we've got this another compounding factor to it that I think is really, mean, it's critical to be holistic in how we address this, because our teams are not just sitting in San Francisco or sitting in New York or Boston or Phoenix or wherever. This is the one I want to, Darren, maybe just weigh in on first, and Anil, if you've got something to add, please do. But Andrew asked a question I think it's pretty interesting, just in the lexicon of expertise and knowledge management. But do you have any kind of tools or techniques that you can share? You know, I know this is probably a huge topic, but just quickly, or resources even, recommended for constructing like an expertise matrix, and following on to that, are there indirect and intangible expertises? How do you get to those? How do you collect that information? Yeah.
One of those things, it really depends on what people tools that you have within organizations. One of the things that I try to encourage as part, again, in a new hire, or also within organizations, is most companies have profile pages now. You know, with O365 tending to be the most common platform, right? Everybody has their profiles, and in there is encouraging people to put their expertise so it becomes searchable. So if I need to find somebody who's got knowledge on SAP, I can literally type SAP into the, you know, the people directory, and could pull people who already have that in their profile up, and then it allows me to directly connect to them. Others is encourage your team. Again, performance improves within organizations the more that you're connected to other people who have that experience and knowledge. So you notice that externally, at least when I do Facebook or Instagram, you have friends that will tag you in things that go, oh, you were asking about this. So carrying some of those external social media behaviors internally is also helpful. So for MS Teams, what I'll do as part of the rollout is encouraging people to @mention. So, hey, go ahead and just @mention somebody's name if there's knowledge or information you knew they were looking for, and you just so happen to come across it during conversations or in a particular post. So those are some of the things there. So there really isn't a panacea, a tool that will do everything, right? This is why look at the human behaviors and the processes, and then find out what tools best fit with that culture. That's kind of the way that I would look at it.
Thank you for that. Anil, anything to add before we want to transition us here to the other side?
No, I mean, I think Darren is spot on. You know, I think the only thing that I would say is that you know, people work differently, and we have to be open to that different way of working and different styles of working. And so I think it's important for us to kind of make sure that we're thinking through that a little bit, and that we're open to those different ways of working. So, you know, I think that's the only thing that I'd want to make sure that we don't forget, is that we are working with people, and that we have to be kind of open to those different styles and different ways that they want to collaborate.
Gentlemen, Anil and Darren, thank you very much for your expertise and your time. I want to just, as we transition everybody back to whatever they're doing in their own world of work, in their new, better environment, we appreciate you spending an hour with us and sharing your questions with us. I think we could have gone on for probably another hour, and certainly we didn't get enough of the questions, which leads me to believe that we could probably do this again sometime. In the meantime, I want to remind folks that our gracious hosts at OnFrontiers, who organized the three of us to get together, and it was lovely meeting these gentlemen. It's the first time I've met them. Want to thank them and remind folks that, you know, in terms of gathering this intellectual property that is the expertise within organizations and knowledge management, and OnFrontiers is an expert at this and a growing organization, a force behind how a lot of multinational enterprises are doing this today. And so a gentle plug for them, if you don't know more about, or you'd like to know more about OnFrontiers, visit their website, read a bit. There's some great stuff there, and there are more talks like these, and stay in the network because we're going to share more information, and the folks there share more information with us all the time. So want to thank again you gentlemen. I've really had the pleasure to meet all of you and spend an hour with you this morning. It's been my pleasure, and thanks for the audience for tuning in, and I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their day. Thank you very much.